much
Big pleasure.
with this. Yeah, I think we're ready.
Okay. Maybe. Okay, we're online. Huh.
Yeah, I think we're ready.
I think we should not say anything.
Good plan.
I'm going to mute myself, okay? And then I'll go on. I'm going to turn on the recording and start at 2 o'clock. Is that okay with you?
Good plan, John. Okay, hello everyone. I think we can go ahead and get started. We have a very fancy setup where we're just kind of learning to work around some new technology workarounds. We're working around our workarounds. And so thank you for being patient with us. If the stream goes down or anything like that, just stay tuned. We'll figure it out together. And I appreciate your patience in doing so. I think now is a time of like really deep understanding of each other's circumstances. Everyone is going through a lot of hard stuff right now. And so I'm glad that you're here with me. Welcome to the Ballard Institute Museum of Puppetry at Home on your Facebook page. My name is Felicia Cooper. I'm the graduate assistant at the Ballard Institute Museum of Puppetry, and I'm a third-year grad student at the UConn Puppet Arts program, which is super exciting, I think. Today, we're just gonna do a story building workshop. All summer, we've been making these amazing puppets out of different materials. We've been using performance techniques, but I was kind of thinking about like, what is the hardest part about making a puppet show? What is something that I always kind of bump into every time that I try to make a puppet show? And it's the story. It's just really difficult. And so that's what we're gonna focus on today. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the Ballard Institute, the University of Connecticut, and the Connecticut Office of the Arts for helping make this happen. And we're just gonna do our usual typical breathing exercises and get our wiggles out. Okay, so as usual, you go in through your nose and out through your mouth. We're gonna do it 3 times. So just take a minute, check in with yourself, see, how am I feeling? What kind of stories am I here to tell today? Maybe that's a thought that you hold as you breathe in through your nose. 1, out through your mouth. In, out. In, out. Whew, that always helps me to feel more focused and more ready to make art. And I think even online, it really helps just to do a little bit of breathing to get in the same space and the same kind of time zone a little bit. Even if we're in different time zones. And when I do that exercise with kids, usually they're like, you can start with something silly, like they have to make like when they're breathing out for the first couple times, but they'll get used to it. And eventually kids usually ask like, can we do more breaths, more breathings today? So hopefully if you're a teacher, you'll have the same experience. Maybe roll your shoulders back, roll your shoulders forward, get some classic stretches going. How about that Sixers game last night? Oh my God, I could not even believe it. Time to get Brett Brown out of town, if you ask me, okay? If anyone has any basketball opinions, you can, and puppetry opinions, you can bring them to me. So, like I said, telling stories is really difficult. It is something that is really inherent to our humanity, but putting together stories that make sense in order for performance, sometimes we have a little bit of a block around that. And I wonder if, in an ideal world, maybe we would just tell each other stories more often, or maybe we would listen more deeply. But in the meantime, here are ways that you can start to tell stories of your own, so you can build those practices of your own. A story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And if you've ever been in a high school English class, so I've taught this with really little kids as well, you know about the Aristotelian arc, which is to say that a story has a beginning, an inciting action, what is next? A conflict, a climax, resolving action, and end, right? So we kind of know what a story looks like. We have this kind of arc. And that's the Aristotelian arc from Aristotle. We all know that. And I think more and more we're interested in getting outside of that a little bit, because so many stories are written in that in American culture, right? Other examples are like Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, right? We have those structures available to us, and those are great to use. But I think in order to access it, I just needed to like remix it and look it up a little bit differently. So for kids, you can always say it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And what I found is a way to begin to understand those is to really ask who is telling the story, right? Is it a narrator? Is it a character in the story? Can you write from that perspective? Is your narrator reliable? Do you trust your narrator? Is your narrator maybe a little bit of a trickster, a little bit of someone who tells jokes or wants you to see things differently than they actually were? Finding the truth in your story, I think, is kind of up to you, but how your audience finds the truth is something that you need to be really intentional about. And these are just like tips and tricks that I found as someone who has trouble writing and who isn't good at telling clear stories. These are just tricks to kind of get things going, to get that process understood, and to get like a pen to paper. Okay, another one, and one that has, I think, works for a lot of puppeteers, is to take it and look at what character is being, like, what is the character that is telling the story. And a lot of the times you might look at, like this character. What does this character want to say to me? And, you know, if you're a puppeteer, you probably have at least somewhat of an imagination. You probably assign at least some sort of personality onto different objects. And so you might just look at it for a while and visually get some ideas about what this thing might say to you, right? She has really long eyelashes, so maybe she wants to talk to me about her eyelashes, which then talks about, like, she's the most beautiful bunny rabbit in the whole world, and that's why she got turned into a gold statue. And she got turned into a gold statue by someone who wanted to preserve her beauty and didn't want her to grow as a person or as a bunny, right? Like, you can really let your imagination run wild. You can always edit it later. You can always make it more particular or make more sense later. Oh, I'm sorry, little bunny. We'll just put her right here. She's watching as well. So then you might introduce another character. And I really like dinosaurs. I always have a lot of dinosaurs in my stories. And you might say, okay, well, this character, and use objects. If you're a puppeteer, use the objects around you, even if they're like a salt shaker or something. Like, use the objects around you, because it helps me so much to get it out of my head and just project it onto some object that exists, especially if you're by yourself, like so many of us are right now, or, you know, you don't have the people to bounce it off that you might normally. So, okay, how might the dinosaur have viewed this story? Was he the one who turned her into a statue? Or maybe he was the one who I'm assigning him a male gender. Maybe they were the one who wanted the bunny to grow into her own beauty, right? And didn't want her to need to be preserved in this statue golden state, right? And you know, while we have cameras and while we have all these things available to us, you can play with perspective. She can be a giant rabbit. And that brings me to visual storytelling, right? Where sometimes, if I can't put words to the story, what I'll do is I will go ahead and draw the story, or even use objects to kind of map it out so that I have an understanding of what the story looks like, even if I don't know the words that accompany it. And again, these are just my confessions of a bad writer, consider them, okay, as someone who's not very good at writing. They're doing railroad maintenance right now, which is pretty fascinating. They have trucks that have special wheels that have track where they can go on the railroad tracks. It's really an incredible thing to see, if you ask me. They've been really helpful in helping Connecticut get through what was a really difficult storm for a lot of people. Anyway, onward. Another thing that really helps me when I'm trying to jumpstart a story, and the characters are not inspiring me, I can't even map it out visually, it's just to have prompts at the ready to go. You know, maybe on a rainy day, you write a bunch down and put them in a jar. Maybe you have something that I've done in the past with kids, is I have story beginnings, story middles, and story endings. And the beginnings might be something like, on a very sunny day. And the middle might be, they saw a dinosaur. And the ending might be, and they all ate marshmallows and fell asleep, right? And then your job is connecting those three things that happen, the beginning, that middle, and that end. And like, these are just writing exercises to get yourself used to it. Because another thing about a confession of a bad writer is that you have to write in order to get better at writing. I know it's really hard. And while you're working on those characters, you might ask them different things about what they want, right? I also want to point out that Carson Ellis, who is a really incredible illustrator and children's book author, has an exercise online about drawing that I think could apply to any sort of character, any sort of story that we want. And I will post that link, but it's called Transmundane Tuesdays. And what it is she just has three different prompts that she picks at random that you draw a picture of. But I'm sure you could write a story about it too. So like one of them was, is a cat wearing glasses holding a golden scepter? And then a bunch of people all do these things, draw a character that has all these qualities. And so, you know, these are just all different ways of gaining different perspectives on how to tell a story that might all start the same way, but will look really, really different, because what we bring to our stories is really special. Okay. Oh, okay. Another exercise. So this is, I think, originally like an improvisational exercise for people in improv theater situations. But it's a fun one to play if maybe on the phone or with other people. But you can say, fortunately, my garden is plentiful this year. Unfortunately, so are the rabbits. Fortunately, the rabbits have become my best friends. Unfortunately, that means I can't turn them down when they ask for carrots. And so you alternate fortunately and unfortunately as a way of telling a story. And it really helps you shift perspective really quickly. It's just an exercise in order to get used to moving your story forward, moving it along. Otherwise, trust me, I would get so caught up on what I'm growing in my garden. I would get so caught up on what the bunnies think and why they deserve my garden. Like, it just helps you get the story moving in order to, if you just play a few games. Another game that you can play with other people, you can play this one in the car, you can play this one in the hallway, wherever you need to, is a one-word or one-sentence story game. And I remember at one school that I was teaching, we made this story about how pickles are magical because they transform from cucumbers to pickles. And the kids could not get over that. And that became a whole theme of our summer, was things that transform, but also just cucumbers into pickles. And every story that we told was about pickles. Every drawing that we did was about pickles. And it was really fun just to have something to return to focus on. So if you need to do that for yourself, one for me is dinosaurs. Another one that I really like tends to be about gardens. These are all things that I've mentioned, right? It's okay to have things that you rely on because you can always move away from them and you can always substitute them as something else. I think this is a little bit more of a lecture than a workshop, but I'm happy that you're here all the same. Let me check and make sure there's no comments or anything like that. No, we're all still here. We're all still here. Don't forget to let go of the tension in your shoulders, let go of the tension in your jaw. You want to be loose if you're writing. Another thing that helps is if you write on a computer, you might try writing with a pen, or you might try, one time I was really stuck with an idea and I wrote it down and I folded it up and I put it in a drawer so that I could move on to my next idea. You know, like there are things that you can do in order just to make writing a little bit easier when you get stuck. And then when I needed that idea again, I could just open the drawer and there it was. So another one that you can play with others or by yourself is similar to this character thing with the objects, but it's a little bit more active. This one is called the Stagecoach Game. And in the Stagecoach Game, what you do is you pretend something catastrophic happened, right? Let's say a giant dragon came into town. And then you have all different characters who you want to ask about it, right? And it's like they're all on a stagecoach together. I guess that's why it's called the Stagecoach Game. You have to get them to narrate what happened to you as though you're like a reporter and you're taking their story. So, Mrs. Owl, what happened? What happened when the dragon came into town? Well, I was just baking my famous mulberry pie when the dragon came and toasted it to bits. Oh my goodness, so the dragon was pretty hot. The dragon was awfully warm. And I know I look a little bit crazy right now, but if you're writing and you're by yourself, it's okay to look a little bit crazy. I think all artists in their process without context probably look a little bit atypical and or atypical of like normal human behavior. I'm not sure how to say that because I think that it's okay for these things to not be normal or usual. Like I think we can just accept that. So okay, so the dragon was hot. Yes, I've never felt flames so hot. And you know, my mulberry pie, it usually needs something that's, well, it's a slow bake, you see. I've been making it for years. It's very rare for me to get up so early in the morning. Usually I'm nocturnal, and today it was a special day for me to bake my mulberry pie. Oh, why was it special? Does someone else want to say something? And you can say like, well, it was special because it was the day when I got turned into a statue officially. You did? My goodness, what caused that? And so it's a way of asking questions that just allows us to tease out a little bit more of those stories when we're stuck. And just another thing is like, just go for the first draft, you know, it's just a draft. It's just a draft. So another thing that really helps, and this is something that I can show you from my personal notebooks, how I've done it, is to draw a map. And I know we talked a little bit about this structure here, right? This kind of mountain that we climb in order to tell a story. But I think it can also be a little bit of a map, right? Like we go from, if you consider each plot point, we go from place to place to place. And so this is what my kind of story maps look like, right? Where it says things like prologue, and then like, what are my goals of the prologue? And I just go from place to place to place to place. And then I see where there's an offshoot that doesn't go anywhere. That's maybe a scene that can be cut. Or maybe it's a scene that needs to be later on so that it leads somewhere else. And that's just a way of, like I said, of figuring out the sequence of a story, because often what will happen for me is I have all these different ideas of what should happen, but I don't know the order of when or how they should happen. And so one of the reasons that I invited you guys to bring note cards or Post-it notes today is so that you can go ahead and write them down and kind of make them like a storyboard. And John Bell refers to this as dramaturgy. He says this is a very like dramaturgical exercise. And I totally agree. It's also something that I know Maggie Flanagan in our program made great use of when she was planning her MFA project. It was really incredible to see and understand how she saw the story in order to have a whole wall of index cards with different images on them explaining how the story played out. And so if you're a visual communicator and you are working on your collaborations, that's a really good way to do that in order to help people understand it. So that's been a big help for me when I've been writing these stories, is to just write down the things that happen and kind of shuffle them like cards and then see what happens from there. Or like I said, to visually communicate all of it on a big board. You know, whether you're a talented artist or, well, all of us are talented artists, but whether you're just drawing like stick figures and dots, or whether you have these like really elaborate characters already played out, it's just a way of getting the story out of your brain and onto a page. Okay. Now, another way that, you know, we're bringing from all these other different versions is all these other different versions of thinking, right? Like some of these are from, some of these I'm getting these exercises from teaching. Some of these I'm getting from, like, I studied developmental psychology in my undergraduate degree with theater. And so like some of these are like therapy techniques. And this one is what, like a therapy technique is a guided visualization, right? Or a meditation technique, a guided visualization of what the story is. So maybe puppetry has a lot to do with world building and a lot to do with are the rules of the world that you're creating. And so in order to create a world, you might have to visualize it, especially if you're a visual learner or visual thinker. And so you can close your eyes and just imagine yourself walking through that world. And maybe you find a space to sit, and maybe you just observe what happens. And maybe a story plays out just in that you observe just by putting yourself in the world of the story. And you can get really detailed and specific there, right? Where I was talking about how I want to plot out the garden, but that doesn't progress the story. Like, maybe if that's important to you, take the time to do that. And that'll help you move on to what the characters are and what the story is. Another thing that I think a lot of puppeteers do is they're inspired by the materials at hand. Like, someone was telling me that they made a egg carton out of, or they made a puppet out of the egg cartons, right? And our relationship to material, I think, is incredibly significant to the work that we do as puppeteers. And so maybe if I'm looking at an egg carton, maybe I'm inspired to tell a story about chickens, or I'm inspired to tell a story about pressed cardboard, or maybe the eyes inspire me to write something about aliens, right? There's all kinds of ways to find inspiration that might not come to mind right away. So don't be afraid to really think outside the box when you're looking for inspiration. Yeah, the egg carton inspiration was huge. It even sent me a picture. It was beautiful. And let me see. Egg carton inspiration, inspired by materials. Another story that I have about that is that I was writing this paper about someone who's been in many of our beautiful forums and was a guest artist at UConn, Theodora Skipetari. And she had said that her relationship to materials had totally changed with the advent of the internet. And I think this is absolutely a time, like the advent of the internet, where our relationship to materials totally changes, because the way that we obtain materials totally changes. You might not be able to just walk into a thrift store and find the perfect thing to complete your puppet show. You might have to look around at the things that already exist in your home, or the things that you find in nature. I know Elise did an incredible nature puppetry workshop, and there's a bunch of people doing similar ones that are really beautiful. Let me see, what else did I want to say? I hope this has been helpful. Like I said, I know these are a lot of kind of disjointed exercises, but what are the exercises? Let's go over them. Changing the perspective and the narrator. And you can always be inspired by character, and your character can maybe write a journal about what's happening. Sometimes it's easier to write from a first person perspective. Put yourself in those shoes, especially if you're an actor, recovering actor. Have your prompts at the ready, right? Be ready to go with your inspiration. You can play the fortunately, unfortunately game. You can do the one word sentence, one word story game. And a way of doing that by yourself, if you are alone, is maybe you just write one sentence a day. Forget about it, come back to it, write yourself another sentence. Slow paced story. The Stagecoach Game, where you interview different characters about what has happened. Story map, storyboard structure. Guided visualization or meditation on world building. Be inspired by the materials at hand. And then I think so that's 9 exercises. And I think the 10th exercise is a little bit more of one where I just want to say, like, it's important who is telling the story. And stories are incredibly powerful. So it's okay if you need to train your voice to tell the story, if it doesn't come to you naturally the way that it does to some people, right? There are some people who are born storytellers, and they say, like, oh, she has the gift, she has the tongue. That's incredible. And we can learn a lot from those people. But if you're like me and you like doing all the other stuff, but the stories, it's always a little bit sticky to unravel, like a big ball of tape, then here are just some things that you can do. I think especially now, as we're looking at, we're looking more closely at systems, whose story gets told and who tells that story is more important than ever. So I'd say also, and this is a note for myself as well, like, don't be afraid to listen to stories that you might not go to at your first go around, that you might change up a little bit. Oh, I see we have a comment. Awesome. Can you give us an example of how you might do some of the exercises with elementary age kids? Absolutely. What an awesome question. Thank you. So The Stagecoach Game, you could ask each kid to play one of the characters and one of the kids to be the reporter. That's just off the top of my head. The story map one, and this is one that I've done in classrooms, is, as you know, I would always start the afternoon by reading 2 picture books. And as you're reading the picture book, you might ask the kids to draw that story map or draw that storyboard. So that's one way. Let me see, having prompts at the ready. Like I said, you could have those 3. I had jars in my classroom, one with a jar of beginnings, a jar of middles, and a jar of endings, and then had kids pick one of each and then tie them together. Let me see. Another really fun one is Exquisite Corpse. This is a pretty classic one where you have a piece of paper folded in 3, and you ask one kid to draw the head, and then he folds it over, and without looking, another kid draws the middle, folds it over, without looking, another kid draws the feet, the legs and feet. And from there, what you could do is have kids write about each other's creations. Another exercise that I've used to varying degrees of success, this one took quite a lot of focus, is you draw a picture. It could be abstract, it could be with whatever you want, and then hand it to someone else. And then someone else uses your picture to tell a story. And that can be like, a lot of the time I think we have public speaking classes. That's one that you can do in public speaking or in theater or applied arts classes. Another one, to be inspired by materials at hand. One of my favorite exercises is called Ordinary Mythologies. And what you could do is find something in your classroom that's like totally normal, like a whiteboard marker. And you and this requires a little bit of imagination on the teacher's part too, but if you're watching this, then I'm sure you are an imaginative person and you can absolutely do this in your classroom, even if your classroom is online, which for health and safety reasons, let's hope. You might say like, oh my gosh, kids, I found it. And the kids will be like, what did you find? And you'll be like, I found my favorite marker. Do you know why it's my favorite marker? And then you can build this whole mythology about this silly, totally boring, totally ordinary marker and build like who gave it to you, why it was important to you as a teacher, why it's the glue that holds this classroom together. Don't be afraid to really raise the stakes in order to allow people to let their imaginations run wild. I hope that answered your question. Yeah, those are some of those exercises that I've done with elementary aged kids, and with older kids as well. So I think that's all. But like I said, I would just encourage people to get themselves and really sink themselves into stories that are maybe a little bit of an adventure outside what you normally might read. You might read a poet who is from a totally different cultural background than you, especially right now, we should be listening to the voices of Black poets, authors, storytellers, puppeteers, all of which we have a lot of great examples of. So I think that is the end of this workshop. Unless there are any further questions, please let me know what you do with your stories. I would love to hear about it. We'll have a performance workshop, I think, next week. So you can start to use all those puppets you've made, all the stories that you've made, and finally get it together. Tomorrow, we have a forum at 4:00 with Dr. John Bell. And Friday, we have a workshop with Elise Vaness at 2 p.m. So stay tuned, Ballard Institute and Museum of Puppetry Facebook page. We've always got something going on, and I'm sure that won't stop soon. So thank you so much for being here today, for listening to what turned out to be a little bit of a lecture, more of a lecture than a workshop, but I really appreciate you being here for it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you to the University of Connecticut, the Connecticut Office of the Arts, and the Ballard Institute for making this happen. I'm Felicia Cooper, and yeah, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your stories. Bye.